What's up YouTube, it's JP Dumpy, your BMW genius here at BMW Fort Washington. In today's video, I'm going to be going over my personal settings and why I choose them, and it might help you in your choice when you give your new BMW, either with iDrive 7 or in this case, iDrive 8. So with that, let's dive on in. Alright, so there are a couple things that I always do every single time I get into any of these cars with iDrive 7 or iDrive 8. First and foremost, I always do my BMW ID, make sure it's logged in, and I set up my digital key. So in this case, digital key plus with the newer iDrive 8. The second thing I always do is I go into my main settings. For time and date, I always turn on automatic time and date. That way I don't have to worry about time changes when I drive cross country or any kind of other thing, or daylight savings for that matter. Next thing I do is voice control. I always turn off Alexa because I personally don't have Alexa. Turn on Siri. And for BMW's personal assistant, I always make sure everything is on with the wake word active. Last but not least, because I like to actually have a little kind of personal interaction, I always change from the harmonious option for Siri, or BMW Assistant, to expressive. That gives me a little tiny face, which makes it a little more personal, and it seems like you're actually talking with someone else in the car, especially if it's a long, lonely road trip. Next thing I do is whenever I have access to any kind of upper sound system, so this particular one being the Bowers & Wilkins system in the 7 Series, I always turn on my sound intensity, 3D sound, make sure the full surround sound is on. When it comes to my equalizer, I do what I call the Wonder Woman thing. So I kind of make a little W in the middle, so that way you don't have too much bass and too much treble. You bring out the mids to get your main fills, rhythm sections, things of that nature that activate more inside the middle section. So you have a nice full system, even if you decide to turn up the intensity all around. When it comes to anything else, volume settings, I always turn on my speed volumes. Therefore, the faster I go, the more cabin noise there is. It increases the volume so that the volume seems the same regardless of how fast and how much wind noise is around you. When it comes to other things that are in here, I always make sure that my digital key is set by always checking that. I personally don't use the key card just because I like the digital key better from the phone itself. And displays. I always make sure that my head-up display, whenever I have it, is at maximum brightness. Another thing I always do is I make sure that all of my optional views and displays are in my head-up display. You can have it in your instrument cluster if you prefer it down there, but I prefer it in my head-up display, so the second I start to touch that itself, it shows up here, so I don't have to take my eyes off the road. Another thing I'll do, especially on the newer ones, is I will make sure if they have a driving settings in iDrive 8, I go to my system settings for driving itself. Actually, let's do this one first. Parking. If you're ever doing parking, I highly suggest, especially if you have park distance control on a parking, go to the active park distance control emergency braking and make sure that is on for rear and sides. Therefore, everything is covered and you have your butt covered. Drive off monitoring, completely up to you, but this one's a great way to kind of make sure you don't drive off too fast if things are in the way and you don't accidentally hit something. On that same kind of notation, safety and warnings, I always have this guy's set to late. I prefer to drive a little more and have forward collision mitigation at a later time. Lane departure, similar situation. I have it only in dangerous situations. So that's the one where if you're driving on the highway, you start to leave a lane, it knows if you're leaving the lane and will either pull you in or not. I personally leave it on because I like that. If you don't want to do that, turn off steering intervention. With the blind spot detection, I suggest using expanded and have steering intervention with warning, so you know when someone's in your blind spot, not only from the indicator itself, but you also get an audible warning as well as the physical thing saying, yo, don't do that. Side collision warning, always helpful. Someone starts to drift into your lane, it lets you know and it will adjust accordingly. Last but not least, exit warning with a warning tone. So if you're starting to get out of your car, you're on the side of the road, and someone's coming up the other side towards you, you will be able to know, and it will tell you, hey, don't get out of the car just yet, it's not safe. Emergency stopping, basically if there's ever, this is for if you ever have a medical emergency, it'll take you to the side of the road or take the car to a stop and put on the hazards. Definitely worth having on that. Last but not least, whenever you have driver assistance professional, you have all of your driving settings in here. Now, I don't have speed limit assist on because I find that to be complete horse poop. Why? Because when you go in here, you have the options to have different limitations and speed adjustments between under 40 and over 40 if you so desire, but you're limited to 5 miles per hour on both, even though it says you have up to 10. So that's something I found to be a small issue with the system, so I don't use it. Distance control, I always set mine to close and have it for situational distance, meaning the faster you go, the little more distance it gives you, so it's relative to on that. For route intersection and intersection driving assist, I always turn that on. Cornering speed fast, because 10 times out of 10 it's on the highway. And lane guidance with navigation with steering impulse, meaning that if you're on the road, it's going to give you a little pulse this side or that side, let you know get in that lane or that lane accordingly, making your drive easier. Last but not least, whoops, didn't mean to hit that with my elbow. Go back, please. Last but not least, assisted driving, automatic lane change, and assisted driving plus active. Now, if you have the newer one with iDrive 7, that also includes Highway Assistant Plus. That basically gives you complete hands-free driving on the highway, as long as this little sensor right here, this little dip you may or not be able to see. Let me try it this way. You might be, you still can't see it. Regardless, there's a little sensor right here in this little divot that you get in your display. That's looking at your eyes, making sure that you're paying attention. If you're not, it'll give you a warning. Always good to know. And last but not least, chassis. I personally enjoy, you can tell I obviously did not set this car up for myself yet, but I personally enjoy having the brakes set to automatically go on, so that way with the newer ones that don't have a physical park button, rather than having to hit the park brake for myself. So, if I'm in drive, I come here, the second I turn off the car, it puts the park brake on for me anyway. I think it's a good thing to have. Last but not least, I personally always have my gestures set for myself. So because I have everything set for this, I have gesture control up here. I personally like to use the gestures, especially with the newer ones. So if I want to, I have mine personally set. You can set any app. If you didn't see, I made a short about this just a few moments ago, but you can set any of your apps, whether it's in CarPlay or Android Auto or Cars apps itself, you can set it to gesture controls. So I have mine set to a better route plan, so I can go open, close, open, and it automatically pulls up that exact app. Super fun to have, very useful. You can set those for one of two apps, either the 505 or the 2 is set for muting and unmuting. So yes, that's about that. The other thing I do that some people might find controversial, but I find it to be extremely helpful, is my driving position. So my particular driving position, I like to make sure that I'm as comfortable as I can be. I always make sure that my back is slightly more towards the upright thing. If I have upper adjustability, I tend to hunch, so I make the back of the seat a little more adjustable for the multifunctional seats. I like to make sure that my steering wheel, let's turn this guy on for it, and let's go to my setting. So I like it so that when my arm is extended, I still have a bent elbow, and I like it so my wrists can sit on the top. If you do have a full extension, I highly suggest you don't sit anything further, so that when your arm's at full extension, if your wrist is not on the top, that's going to be a little bit harder for you to maneuver in hard situations. You don't believe me? Go to driving school, you'll figure that out too. Or if you're a race car driver, you'll understand there too. Secondly, I always do 9 and 3. You have the most turn ability with that, so that we're not worried about that. And try to think if there's anything else that I do other than I have longer legs, so I make sure that this guy's up and supporting my thighs whenever I drive. If you don't have the full adjustable seats, consider that. Most of them also have a manual adjustment for that as well, in case you need that. And with that, that is my semi-long but quick run through of all the reasons that I do my settings the way I do. And how do you do your settings? If you like that, let me know below. And if you have any reason that you do something else, tell me why. I'm always curious to see what other people's opinions are. And last but not least, as always, if you found this helpful, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. All the usual things that we get with these videos. And thanks so much for being with us. Have a great rest of your day.